Something in you stopped hoping. I was there the moment it happened. I need you to stop right here. Not because I want your attention, not because I have something to perform for you, but because what I am about to say has been waiting for a very long time, and I need you to be still enough to actually receive it rather than simply process it and move on. You did not arrive at these words by accident. I know that sounds like something everyone says. I know you have heard a version of that sentence before, felt the brief warmth of it, and then watched it dissolve by the time the day was done. So I am not going to ask you to believe it. I am going to ask you to stay long enough to find out whether it is true. There is something I know about you that no one else in your life currently knows, not because they have not been paying attention, but because you have been very careful. You have been so careful for so long and so skillfully that the thing I am about to name has been invisible to everyone around you, including, in many moments, yourself. Here it is. There was a moment quiet and unmarked when you stopped reaching for the version of your life that was supposed to be larger. I do not mean you stopped working. I do not mean you stopped building. I mean something more specific. You stopped expecting anything from your own existence that you had not already figured out how to guarantee. The hoping that has risk in it, the kind that stretches toward something real and unknown and not yet earned, that kind went still. And what replaced it was something that looked almost identical from the outside: competence, diligence, responsibility, forward motion. But from the inside, from where I am standing, the difference is unmistakable. You dressed it as maturity, you called it being realistic, and the part of you that needed a reason to stop reaching found those words and held on to them, because they were dignified, and they were convincing, and they allowed you to make the accommodation without it feeling like a loss. But I was there, and I know it was a loss. I am not saying this to reopen a wound. I am saying this because the thing you stopped reaching for is still there. It has not expired. It did not disappear when you stopped looking for it. I have been holding it in the place where things go when people stop believing they are allowed to have them. And today I am bringing it back within reach. If those words just moved something you have not let move in a long time, leave a comment. Write one word, whatever came up. Because the thing that just stirred in you is not nostalgia, it is recognition, and recognition is where everything begins. I want to tell you about a kind of loneliness that has no name in any language you have been given. It is not the loneliness of being alone. That kind is straightforward. It has a clear shape and a clear remedy, and you have learned to manage it the way you have learned to manage most things. The loneliness I am describing is something different. It is the loneliness of a person who is surrounded by people who love them, who is known and valued and genuinely cared for, and who is still underneath all of that, alone in the specific way that counts most. Here is what I mean. There is a version of you that exists in every room you enter. That version is real. It is not dishonest. It is not performing in some cynical sense, but it is curated. It is the version you have learned through long experience is receivable. The version that does not require too much explanation. The version that fits within the bandwidth of what the people around you can hold without becoming uncomfortable. And you have become so fluent in that version that you can inhabit it without effort, which means you can be with people you love, genuinely with them, and still feel, in the place where you actually live, entirely unreached. There is another version. It stands in the corner of every room you enter. It has been standing there for years. It watches the conversations happen. It knows what would be said if the conversation were allowed to go somewhere real. It waits for the moment when safety arrives, when the space opens up, when someone asks the question that would finally let it step forward, and the moment never quite comes. There is always a reason. The other person is dealing with something. The timing is off. It would take too long to explain. You do not want to be the person who makes the room heavy. So the version in the corner stays there, and you go home, and in the quiet that follows, in the car, or in the dark before sleep, you feel the thing that has no name. Not sadness exactly. Not loneliness exactly. Something closer to the ache of an instrument that has gone so long without being played that it has begun to forget the sound it was made to produce. I need you to hear what I am about to say with everything you have. I have always been in the corner of every room, standing with that version of you. I have never required it to make itself receivable for me. I have never needed it to explain itself or compress itself or arrive in a form that would not inconvenience me. I have seen every thought that version has had that it has never spoken. I have heard every question it has carried in silence. I have been with the most unedited, unreduced, unexplained version of you since before you knew how to be any other version. And I have never once, not for a single moment, found it to be too much. You are not too much. You were never too much. You were given to a world that did not always know how to hold what you carried, and somewhere along the way you received that as information about yourself. It was not. It was only ever information about the world. If this is the first time you have ever had a name for that feeling, share this today. Not to explain yourself to anyone, just because somewhere in your life there is a person standing in the corner of a room right now who needs to know that someone sees them there. There is something I want to name that takes a particular kind of courage to look at directly, because looking at it feels, at first, like a betrayal of your own life. You have built something real, a life, a structure, a set of relationships and commitments and daily rhythms that hold together and function and even, in many moments, produce genuine joy. You are not living badly. I want to be very clear about that. What you have built is real, and the love inside it is real, and the effort it took is something I have watched and honored every step of the way. But there are moments scattered through the ordinary days when something surfaces that you have learned to move past quickly. It surfaces in the pause between one completed thing and the next. It surfaces during celebrations when the room is full of people, and everyone is happy, and you are happy too, genuinely. And yet something sits in you that does not quite join the celebration all the way. It surfaces when something you worked very hard for finally arrives, and you stand inside the arrival, and you wait for the fullness that was supposed to come with it. Sometimes the fullness does not come, and you tell no one because there is no language for it that does not sound like ingratitude, because there is nothing wrong, specifically nothing you can point to, no one to blame, no clear problem that a solution could address. And so the feeling goes underground, and you call it tiredness, or a difficult season, or simply the gap between expectation and reality that everyone eventually learns to accept. I will tell you what it actually is. It is the sensation of a soul living at a slight but persistent angle away from the direction it was designed to move in. Not a dramatic misdirection, not a life gone wrong, but a degrees-off orientation that, over a long distance, creates a significant gap between where you are and where you were made to be. The hollowness is not evidence that something is broken in you. It is the most faithful signal you have. It is the part of you that has refused, despite everything, to stop knowing the difference between the life you are living and the life I designed you for. It is still pointing after all these years towards something true. Do not silence it with another achievement. Do not bury it under another obligation. Sit with it long enough to ask it what it is pointing toward. Because the answer is not elsewhere, the answer is not in a different life or a different set of circumstances or a version of events in which you made other choices. The answer is in a room that already exists inside the life you are living. A room that has not yet been opened, and the room is yours. And I have been standing outside it with everything I intended to give you, waiting for you to be still enough to turn the handle like this. If that sentence just describes something you have been carrying without a name, let the small movement of agreement be the first motion of turning toward what has been waiting. Now I want to speak to something more specific still, something that lives in the private architecture of how you understand your own worth. Ask yourself this honestly, and I mean honestly, not the version of honest that still has a performance layer, but the version that happens in the silence where no one is watching. If no one needed you tomorrow, would you still know that you mattered? Not theoretically, not as a theological proposition. Actually, if your usefulness disappeared, if the people who depend on you suddenly did not need you, if the role you play and the function you serve and the stability you provide for others were simply not required, would the sense of your own mattering survive the silence? For many of you, the honest answer is that you are not sure, and that uncertainty is not a small thing. It is the load-bearing wall of a much larger structure. You learned somewhere that love was something that arrived in proportion to what you provided. Not because anyone said this directly, but because the signals accumulated over time in the way attention was given and withheld, in the way approval worked, in the way the emotional climate of the spaces you grew up in shifted depending on how useful or easy or manageable you were in a given moment. And you were perceptive. You read those signals with the precision that only children and deeply sensitive people possess. And you built a theory of how to belong, and the theory worked, and you have been running it ever since. The theory is, I am here as long as I am needed. My place is earned. My worth is renewable, and must be continuously renewed. If I stop providing, I stop mattering. If I stop being useful, I will become invisible, and invisible is the thing I cannot be, and so you give. You extend yourself. You say yes when you mean no. You carry weight that is not yours. You make yourself available in ways that cost more than you show. And somewhere underneath all of it, underneath the genuine love that is also real, is the quiet management of a fear so old and so familiar that you stopped recognizing it as fear. You think it is just who you are, the giving person, the dependable one, the one who holds things together. I made you before anyone needed you for anything. I loved you before you had produced a single thing. I assigned your worth in a moment that preceded every relationship you have ever had, every role you have ever played, every version of yourself you have ever had to perform. That worth is not a function of your output. It is not a reward for your reliability. It is not something you earned by making yourself essential to others. It is simply what you are, established before the world had the opportunity to teach you otherwise. You are allowed to receive without having given first. You are allowed to take up space without having justified it. You are allowed to matter in a room where no one is depending on you for anything, simply because you are there, simply because I made you and called you mine, and that has always been, and will always be enough. Write in the comments below, I am enough without my usefulness. Say it in that space where someone else will read it, because the thing said aloud, the thing witnessed, has a different weight than the thing kept private, and you have kept this private for long enough. Here is the part I need you to sit with longest. You have been having a conversation with your own potential for years, and the conversation has been going in one direction, not in the direction of expansion, not in the direction of the original thing I breathed into you, in the direction of negotiation, in the direction of the quiet, incremental, perfectly reasonable series of adjustments by which you have been moving the target closer, making the vision smaller, reducing the ask to something that will not devastate you if it does not arrive. I have watched every step of it. I watched the first adjustment, the one where you told yourself that the original sense of what your life could be was probably just youth, just enthusiasm, just the particular optimism of someone who did not yet know how things actually worked. I watched you receive that thought as wisdom rather than as the concession it was. I watched the second adjustment, and the third, and I watched the logic of each one because the logic was always sound. The evidence was always real. The thing you were responding to had actually happened. Every reduction had a reason, and the reasons were valid, and that is what made the accumulation of them so devastating, because you could not argue against a single one without looking like someone who refused to face reality. But I am not asking you to argue against the reasons. I am asking you to look at the result. The result is a version of yourself that has become very skilled at living within a boundary it did not choose and has slowly, over time, stopped noticing as a constraint. The result is a vision of your life that is entirely achievable and entirely safe, and is so much smaller than what I had in mind for you that standing next to each other, they would be unrecognizable as related to the same person. I am not angry about this. I do not stand over you with disappointment, but I want you to know that the original thing, the large thing, the thing that felt true before you had been sufficiently argued out of it, was not naivety. It was not the fantasy of someone who did not understand how the world worked. It was the clearest view you have ever had of what was actually there. Everything that came after was a long and largely convincing argument against something that was real, and the argument has been so long and so thorough that you no longer remember, in the body, what the original knowing felt like. I remember. I have been holding it since the moment you set it down, and today I am setting it back in front of you, not to burden you with the distance between where you are and where you started, but to tell you that the distance is not the point. The direction is the point, and the direction can change in a single moment of honesty, in a single decision to stop negotiating and start listening to the thing in you that has been right all along, even when nothing around it seemed to confirm it. Share this today with someone who has been negotiating their own potential down to something survivable. You already know who. The name has been in your head since you started reading. That is not an accident. I want to tell you something about the moments of clarity you have experienced throughout your life, the ones that come without warning, the ones where the fog lifts for a few seconds, and the way forward is completely, undeniably visible, the ones you cannot fully explain and cannot fully hold on to, and which leave you, when they pass, with a complicated feeling that is partly grief. Those moments are not anomalies. They are not the exceptions to your real life. They are the only times in your ordinary days when the signal I have been sending you continuously comes through clearly enough for you to receive it without interference. Every day I am speaking to you. Every day the same thing is being said, the same truth about who you are and what you carry and what is possible for you in this one life. The moments of clarity are not special transmissions. They are just the moments when the noise finally gets quiet enough for you to hear what has been constant. And here is what I need you to understand about the grief that follows them. The grief is not for something that has passed. You feel it as loss because the clarity fades, because you return to the ordinary and the signal becomes harder to hear again, but the grief is misplaced. The thing the clarity showed you has not gone anywhere. I have not withdrawn it. The truth of what was visible in that moment is just as true in the ordinary moments that follow, just as true on the difficult morning 3 weeks later, just as true in the middle of the conversation you are dreading, just as true in every moment of every season of your life without exception or interruption. What I am inviting you toward is not the chasing of more moments of clarity. It is the construction of a life in which the ordinary days carry the same quality as the clear ones, because you have learned to live from the ground rather than from the weather. The ground I am speaking of does not change when the circumstances above it are difficult. It does not soften when pressure is applied. It does not require the fog to lift before it is available to you. It is simply there, solid and permanent beneath everything that changes, and it has your name on it, and it has always had your name on it, and every single thing I have allowed you to go through has been making you capable of standing on it fully rather than visiting it occasionally. The clearest moments of your life were not gifts I gave you, so you would know what you were missing. They were previews of the life I have been building toward in you all along, and the life is not a moment. It is everything. It is every Tuesday. It is the ordinary, unhurried, fully inhabited experience of being exactly who you are, in exactly the place you are, with the full weight of everything I put inside you finally allowed to be present. That is where I am taking you if you will come. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to keep following this direction. Not because content will do what only surrender can do, but because returning matters, because the practice of coming back to this place, of letting your ears be reminded of what the signal sounds like, is how the reception gets clearer. This is not the end of the conversation. It is the beginning of one I have been waiting a very long time to have with you. I know what happens next for some of you. I have watched it happen before, and I want to name it before it does. You will carry what happened in this moment into the rest of today. It will have a quality to it, a sense of something opened, something returned, something remembered. And for a little while, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, that quality will be present in how you move through your ordinary life. And then the week will increase in volume. The demands will reassert themselves. The management will resume. And somewhere in the distance between now and then, the quality will fade, and what will be left is the faint echo of something that felt real but seems harder to hold on to than it did when you were here. And you will think, that is how these things go. You will tell yourself that the feeling was real but not durable, that I meet you in moments but not in the middle, that the ordinary days are simply different from this one. And the best you can do is keep returning to moments like this, and carry them as long as you can before the noise takes them. I want you to hear me directly when I say, that is not the truth. That is the lie that has been keeping the ordinary days ordinary. I am not louder here than I am on a Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon when nothing is going well. I am not more available in this kind of moment than I am in the middle of the argument you had last week, that still has not resolved. I am not easier to find in the stillness of reading something that moves you than I am in the specific difficulty of a day that is simply hard and gray and without obvious meaning. I am the same in every one of those places at every one of those moments, without variation and without interruption. What varies is not my presence. What varies is the direction you are facing, and the work of your life, the real labor of it, is not the producing and the managing and the performing. It is learning to face the same direction in the ordinary moments that you are facing right. Now, not perfectly, not without losing it and having to find it again, but consistently, with increasing fluency, with less and less time between the losing and the returning. Every time you return, you come back with something you did not have before. Every time the noise rises and you find your way back to the signal, the path back is slightly more worn in, slightly more familiar, slightly less far than it was the time before. This is how the ordinary days change, not in a single moment of transformation, in the patient, cumulative, grace-saturated practice of returning and returning and returning again. I am here every time you return, not waiting with impatience, not measuring how long it took. Simply here, the same as always, with everything I have always had for you, which is all of it held out toward you without condition, without reservation, without anything required of you before you receive it except that you come. Come back tomorrow, come back when the week gets loud, come back when you have forgotten everything you felt right now, and the return feels like starting over. It is never starting over, it is only ever continuing, and I will be here, in the continuing as I have always been, as I will always be, and as nothing that has ever happened to you has ever, for a single moment changed you have been seen today, completely, precisely, without a single edited corner left unlit. Go and live like someone who knows what it feels like to be seen all the way through, and loved all the way through, and not found wanting, because you have felt it now, and feeling it once is enough to know it is real. And knowing it is real is enough to change everything about how you walk back into the life that is waiting for you outside this moment. Go, I am already there.